Okay, thank you. Next we're on to pay equity. And everyone can hear all right now? The volume's good? Perfect. Okay, so the preamble is, I believe that pay equity is a fundamental human right. Workers should receive equal pay for work of equal value. In 2009, the federal government brought sweeping changes to pay equity in the federal public service. Bill C-10 made it much more difficult for a federal employee to file a pay equity complaint. It did so by changing the definition of a female predominant job. To add insult to injury, the bill transforms pay equity in an equitable compensation issue that must be discussed at the bargaining table. If pay equity is not achieved through the bargaining process, individual workers will be allowed to file a complaint with the Public Service Labor Relations Board, but without their union's support. In fact, this bill would impose a $50,000 fine on any union for encouraging or assisting their own membership in filing a pay equity complaint. Bill C-10 is one more example of the recent attacks on women's rights. So the question is, if elected, what will you do for pay equity and women's rights? Okay, and first we have Kris MacLellan.
It's not fair to have Kris go
Okay.
first.
You can go first. I have A, but you can go first.
Not that any of us want to go first, but I think it's only fair to Kris. I think we don't want to pick on a newbie, too much. Kris and I met for the first time this morning. He's a great young lad. I enjoyed him. But if I could just simply answer the question and say, yeah, I agree with the preamble, because that is exactly the Liberal position. We didn't see the preamble in advance, as I said, but the Liberal Party believes that pay equity, or equal pay for work of equal value, is a fundamental human right. I mean, that's the Liberal position, always has been. We believe that pay equity is a fundamental human right and that every working Canadian woman should be compensated in an equitable manner. And it has to be led by the federal government. I mean, the federal government has to be the leader on this issue. A Liberal government would introduce a new pay equity regime that is truly proactive, that prioritizes pay equity as a human right. At the core of the Conservative changes that were mentioned in the preamble was a plan to move responsibility for oversight of pay equity from the Canadian Human Rights Commission to the Public Sector Labor Relations Board. But that board has no experience with pay equity and no mandate to protect human rights. It was part of the Conservative agenda, and it's very subtle, isn't it? But that's what they did. They moved it from the Human Rights Commission to the Public Sector Labor Relations Board, where they expected to get a more favorable response on rulings dealing with pay equity. That is the type of agenda that undermines our democracy. It is the total lack of transparency, and it's sort of doing things without letting you know what their agenda is. That's scary. That's why we have to make the change.
So now we're going to go to B, which is Gordon Earle.
Thank you. On the issue of pay equity, the NDP has always believed in equal pay for work of equal value. And we would immediately reverse Stephen Harper's attack on pay equity and immediately implement the recommendations of the 2004 Pay Equity Task Force to establish a proactive pay equity regime enshrined in law. So we would take it out of that guessing realm and enshrine it in law. Now on women's rights, we will work with provinces and territories to expand access to shelter and transition houses to support women fleeing violence. We will support a coordinated federal response to violence against Aboriginal women, led by Aboriginal communities and including the ongoing funding of Aboriginal women's organizations. We will improve employment insurance qualification criteria to ensure that those receiving parental leave benefits see no change in their eligibility for employment insurance benefits. We will provide a more flexible and generous employment insurance compassionate care benefit to permit family members to take up to 6 months leave from work to tend to relatives near the end of their lives, up from the current 6 weeks. We will introduce a new caregiver benefit modeled after the child tax benefit to assist low and middle income families in tackling the cost of everyday needs while caring for elderly or dependent family members. Eligible family members will include children, spouses, parents, and other family members, and will be able to receive up to $1,500 per year. We will reaffirm women's rights to safe, accessible abortion services. We will support the work of the new UN Women's Agency. We will restore funding to women's programs and organizations cut by Stephen Harper, including the Court Challenges Program. We will make status of women. Oops, there's my red flag. Okay.
And finally, we do have Kris.
This is a great topic for me. I represent the only federal political party that has a woman, a strong, proud woman, as its leader. And that's something that I take a great amount of pride in. And it's a shame that Canada won't get to hear from her and didn't get to hear from her in the debates because she's clearly got lots of friends here. Women's issues are being neglected in this campaign. And I don't know how the Conservatives can get away with it. When you malign 50% of the population, it really should come back to haunt you, and hopefully it will on May 2nd. Women only make up 22% of our elected representatives in the House of Commons. They are more likely to, not the members of Parliament, but women are more likely to inhabit the poorest sectors of our population, and hence are more vulnerable to society's turning of a blind eye to poverty issues and to environmental issues. Pay equity, affordable childcare, affordable post-secondary education, income splitting, and more generally, women's rights are priorities for the Green Party of Canada. I, as a Member of Parliament, would work to pass pay equity legislation, as recommended by the Pay Equity Task Force, immediately implementing full pay equity for women employed in the federal public service, and to develop tax incentives for private companies to meet the highest standards of gender pay equity. The Green Party proudly would modify the Income Tax Act to enable income splitting, not in 4 years' time, but in a few months' time. We would accomplish this through our progressive tax act system, which would punish those who would pollute our country and pollute our planet, and it would offer a chance for one spouse to take time out of their career to stay home to care for children or another family member. As a member of the Green Party Canada, I would also oppose any implementation of a religious justice system in Canada, such as Sharia law, that would denigrate hard-won rights and take away from women's dignity as a human being. Thank you.
Okay, so the next question is about childcare. So 2/3 of all women with children under 5 years old work outside of the home. Childcare affects all women, regardless of their socioeconomic status, racial background, sexual orientation, or ability. Outside of Quebec, less than 20% of children have access to regulated childcare spaces. A national childcare system wouldn't just affect children, it would go a long way in ensuring women's equality and the well-being of families. In addition, it would create thousands of good jobs and boost the economy. So the question for the candidates is, what will be your commitment and the commitment of your party to building a national, universal, non-profit childcare system? And so this time we are going to start with Kris. Trying to get back on track.
The Green Party is committed to a high-quality, federally funded child care program in Canada, accessible to any family that wants to place children into early childhood education. Workplace childcare has been shown to increase productivity, to decrease employee absenteeism, and to ensure quality childcare for children, meaning parents are able to drop in on their children at any time to visit, and permits longer breastfeeding of infants. Workplace childcare creates spaces for other benefits, recognizing the emerging literature that children benefit enormously from time with their mothers, particularly when they are very young. The beneficial spiral of providing workplace childcare also includes making it easier for many working Canadians to use mass transit. When parents and children travel to the same destination, the trip can be made in less time on public transit, enabling parents to spend more time with their children. Green Party members of Parliament will work to restore and revamp the 2005 agreement reached with the federal government, provinces and territories to achieve a universal access child care program in Canada. $100 checks a month are simply not enough. They would work to create a National Children's Commissioner, as recommended by UNICEF, to ensure children's best interests are considered in policy development and that services across this country are better coordinated. And Green Party MPs will specifically ensure that Canada's universal childcare program provides workplace childcare spaces wherever they are possible. Thank you.
Okay, so now we have Derek Wells.
Thank you. As you may remember, we had a universal child care agreement under the Liberal government led by Paul Martin. Keddy and Dryden worked out a national universal non-profit child care agreement for the first time in our history. All the provinces signed on. That's a feat in this country. You know, we tried for probably in excess of 15 years to make that happen. All the provinces signed on. But what happened? The NDP joined Stephen Harper and voted it down. I think that's shameful. We lost daycare, along with the Kelowna Accord, the Atlantic Accord, funding for literacy, and other essential programs. And we also lost the surplus, and we got Stephen Harper and his $100 a month taxable daycare system. That's not adequate or appropriate child care. The main plank in our platform in this election is what we call the Liberal Family Pact, which contains the Learning Passport for high school kids, which was very popular at Sir John A. this morning. Our family care, stronger public pensions, but perhaps most importantly is an early childhood learning and care plan. $500 million in the first year, $1 billion within 4 years, and we'll keep the $100 a month. So that is a commitment that we made. We've done it before with the help and the cooperation of the provinces, and we will do it again given the opportunity. It's critical, it's part of our program, and I need your support to get up there to make that happen.
And lastly, we have Gordon Earle.
Thank you very much. You know, it's so easy to take things out of context and make it appear that a certain thing happened in a certain way, when in reality one is not presenting all the facts. The fact is that when the Martin government fell, it fell for a number of reasons, and it was not the NDP voting down a national child care program. The NDP has always supported the national child care program, and we will work with the provinces and territories to establish and fund a Canada-wide child care and early learning program, and get this, enshrined in law. And it will be enshrined in law so that people could not come along and on a whim decide that they were going to do away with the program, as so often happens, and we see many examples of this with both the Liberal and Conservative governments in the past. In any event, we would also work toward the creation of 25,000 new child care spaces per year for the next 4 years. We would work toward improvements to community infrastructure to support the growth of child care spaces. And we would also work for the creation of integrated, community-based, child-centered early learning and education centers that provide parents with a one-stop shop for family services. We are very serious about these because we know that our children must be well cared for, and parents have to have the resources and the wherewithal to take care of their children in a way that benefits our society. Thank you very much.